The Falcons made a big, bold trade in round one of the 2025 NFL draft, and not everybody is convinced it's going to work out in their favor.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for a very long time, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP, almost 20 years. Covering this team, podcasting for over a decade. And of course, I appreciate each and every one of you that go strong with me, whether you were checking out falcfans.com, RIP, whether you've been here the entire time with the podcast. But we appreciate you, whether you were always been an everydayer or just became an everydayer. That means you make this podcast your first listen each and every day. And all you have to do to become an everydayer, guys, is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. So today's episode, we are joined by Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports, a Falcons fan, covers the NFL. He's been very vocal and critical of the Falcons' decision to trade up, giving away their future first-round pick to move up for James Pearce, and he'll explain why on today's episode. So without further ado, let's jump into that conversation with Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports right now. Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast with an illustrious guest. He is none other than Charles McDonald, who covers the NFL for Yahoo Sports, and you can find him as one half of the Football 301 podcast with Nate Tice on all podcast platforms. Charles, my friend, welcome home, because this is where you got your start. I will always, every time you come on this podcast, I will 100% take all the credit for all your success. Going back to those Vic Beasley, Shane Ray debates way back in the day, a decade ago.
I wish it was my finish after what Terry did last week. But hey, like I said before the show started, I'm having a better week than Jeff Ulbrich is, so I can't complain too much.
There you go. So, Charles, did you do the thing that we all do where you sit there and you're critical, you know, the week before the draft or the night of the draft, and then you marinate on it and you go like, you know what? I actually think the Falcons have thought about it a little bit more. The Falcons, actually made some smart moves, or are you still not feeling some type of way about the Falcons draft?
I feel like the exact same way that I did last week, where it was weird watching it because we had our live show for Football 301 last week, and I was so ready to react when the Falcons were on the board at 15. And then I picked Jalon Walker. I'm like, oh, whatever. I mean, that's fine range. Thought he's a good enough player. They need pass rush help. They need front seven help. So I was like, whatever, that's fine. I was like really ready to be upset, and then it was fine. And then, as the draft goes on, like you're sitting up there for like 4 hours with no commercial breaks. I started to zone out a little bit. And then I see that they're back on the board. And I was like, whatever. Because I knew going in, they liked James Pearce, they liked Jalon Walker, they liked Mike Green within reason, although they were obviously a little concerned about the character stuff. So when they traded back up to 26, I was like, okay, like this must be James Pearce or Mike Green. And then I saw the compensation. Because honestly, at 26, I didn't really have a problem with like James Pearce going there. Like the idea that he's the 26 picks in the draft is not that offensive to me. But like trading a future first, like how good do they think they're going to be this year?
That's the question, right?
Right. And to me, that's where the delusion starts, because to me, in no certain terms, like are they good enough to be giving up like a future first round pick? Because I get concerned with his defense when I'm like, all right, you drafted Jalon Walker and James Pearce. Obviously, you need a pass rush help. We've been saying that for 15 something years that they need pass rush help. But they overpaid by a lot to me, and now I'm worried because to me, like this season it could go well, but it's not certain that it will go well. Michael Penix, I think you should give him runway to struggle this year. He's only played 3 games. We all know how tough playing quarterback is. So like the idea that he could have an up and down season that you feel good about, But if you end up like 7-10, which to me is like it's on the table, then you trade a lot for a pass rusher. So I don't mind the players that they came away with. I reasonably liked all 4 players that they drafted, that they spent like real picks on this weekend. But man, to trade that future first is really, really pushing it to me, unless they think they're going to be like Super Bowl contenders this year, which is also absolutely insane.
Okay. Well, let's get into your expectations for this team, because the selling point that the Falcons are giving is that they expect their offense to be, one of the better offenses in the league, and they feel like these additions on defense will at least get their defense to competency. And I've sort of termed it as like it's kind of the 2023 Rams blueprint, where you had that, top 10 offense with Stafford and all those guys running it, and then you had a very young defense, minus Aaron Donald and a couple other veteran pieces, and Raheem Morris was able to sort of piece that together. Are you buying what this team is seemingly selling in that regard?
I don't know if I'm buying anything they're selling right now. It's just okay. Fair. Like when I look
over 20 plus years, yeah, it's fair not to buy anything that they're doing.
When I look at this team right now, I see kind of like a worse version of the 2012, like the 2008 through 2012 teams is kind of what I see. Because I don't. First of all, I can't put Matt Ryan expectations upon Michael Penix. I got to see more. I thought his 3 games, like, they weren't bad, they weren't great. He looked like he did at Washington, where he saw a lot of highs, some lows, some inaccuracies, some absolutely insane throws. So we're just gonna have to see more on that. But the defense, man, I get scared because they've built this thing like outside in. So you have you paid for Jesse Bates, you extended AJ Terrell, you draft James Pearce, Jalon Walker, you spend a couple picks on like nickelbacks and guys like that. But where's the beef? Like where's the interior play that is going to allow Jalon Walker and James Pearce to be the best versions of themselves? That's really where I get concerned with this defense, because sure, I do think there's a world where, a few years down the line, you're looking at James Pearce and Jalon Walker as, like, in their own ways, like, credible pass rush pieces. I think they do it in different ways, but until you get there, they're really vulnerable on defense. And I just think the spine is so weak that when you look at like how Carolina ran the ball last year, Tampa Bay has one of the best offensive lines in the league. The Saints just drafted another guy. They have Alvin Kamara. So that's always a tough physical outing. I don't think they've set themselves up for those games. And there's a lot of pressure on Penix and those 2 rookies they just drafted to really hit the ground running. I also just don't like the idea of, if I'm a GM, if I'm Terry Fontenot, hell yeah, like, this could be the last season I'm doing this. Like, we have to go all in. But as someone who is not going to get fired from Falcons fandom at the end of the year, I would like to have that first round pick back for next year. And also, I think they need to protect themselves. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but I think they need to protect themselves in the event that, like, this year goes really wrong for Penix. Like, everything goes bad. He stinks. I don't think that's going to happen, but, like, anything could happen in the NFL. And if you end up giving, like, a top 10 pick to the Rams next year, you're going to look pretty stupid. So I just thought they paid too much. They just weren't ready to make that leap.
Fair enough. We'll see if it comes back to bite them. But you mentioned sort of the weaknesses up front on the defensive side of the ball due to the loss of Grady Jarrett. And I want to dig a little deeper. They lost a cornerstone player in Grady Jarrett. And do you feel like any of these defensive players are cornerstone players? And we'll get into all of that, guys, as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. And with Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with the top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whatever you need, they got it. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, with multiple multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. So here with Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports talking about the Falcons 2025 draft class. And, you know, you lose a big time cornerstone piece of Grady Jarrett over the last decade, has been sort of one of the faces of your defense these last several years. You know, you kind of mentioned it. Do you feel good about any of these players from this Falcons draft class? You know, obviously they have a long ways to go before they can fill the hefty shoes of Grady Jarrett. But do you feel like, you know, 3, 5 or more years down the road, we might be talking about some of these 2025 draft picks in the same way?
I really do think there's a universe where I don't know, like I don't know if like individually if Jalon Walker or James Pearce will be like, you know, great elite pass rushers, but I think like the two of them combined, that could be a productive duo for you for a while, given like you give them the right ecosystem. So I really do like the potential on those guys. I like the range on James Pearce was kind of all over the place because he kind of has a weird like physical profile where you see the 4.4 speed. You look at the jumps and, you know, he barely passed over 30 inches on the vertical jump, which I think shows through in his game a little bit, but they didn't have anyone who could beat off threat off the edge like that. And I think the Jalon Walker stuff is the Jalon Walker pick is it's culture as much as it is trying to get tougher in the front seven. Like I do think just from talking to people at Georgia and following his career over the past few years, like you could make a case to like, maybe this is like the leadership void they're trying to fill with Grady moving on. I guess those guys would probably be like the two best guesses for guys who could be long-term fixtures like that. Like I do like the Xavier Watt-Pitts. I do like Billy Bowman as a player. I think for the All Juice team that Charles Robinson and I do for Yahoo, Billy Bowman was an All Juice team member. He had a lot of fans in the NFL, a lot of fans in the scouting community. So I do think that there's a chance that like this is not a bad haul of players. I really don't think it's a bad haul of players. It's just what you pay to get for it. So if I was going to go back to the original question of like who could be Grady Jarrett type stalwarts, I think your best bet are the two guys drafted in the first round. I really think if I still kind of am even as someone who liked Jalon Walker, I'm still really fascinated to see where they see him fitting, like when it comes to actually, you know, play the games. Cause it was kind of like upside, but master of none type of player and as a front seven linebacker guy. So I'm really interested to see how that goes. But if you're looking at just athletic traits and like potential, both those guys have potential to be long-term starters. It's just, how do we maximize what they're both really good at moving forward?
Yeah. And on that note of Jalon Walker, he's a player that I do feel like his usage is going to matter a lot in the NFL because he's not just a guy that you can just be like, oh, you can just drop him in a defensive scheme and he'll figure it out. Sort of what do you sort of envision if Jeff Ulbrich gives you a call, you know, asking for, you know, some money to pay back this fine, and also you know, wants some advice on how you would sort of scheme up Jalon Walker, what would you do?
After the bye last year, I thought they did a really good job in how they schemed up Caden Ellis. I think you can do some similar things without being so reliant on like interior rush with Caden. I think you can obviously put Jalon outside a little bit more, but kind of like that chess piece player that they turned Ellis to, especially like the Vikings game is the one that comes to mind, where he did such a good job blitzing and pass rushing from the interior. That's kind of the role I see him early on, but it's also it also seems a little bit clogged with Caden Ellis there, but I can't imagine Caden Ellis is going to be on the team like that much longer past this year. So maybe that's like their long-term replacement there. But I do think like how you deploy Caden Ellis with a little bit more edge reps is probably the best way to go about Jalon Walker early on. Now, like the way I look at Falcons defense, like if you can get the third down, it's not the worst setup that they've had, because you're going to have two guys with pass rush promise, which, look, I know we've heard it before a million times. It doesn't actually mean anything until you see it on the field. But you have two guys with pass rush potential. Ebiketie is your third guy. If those guys take those necessary steps, is not the worst group of edge players in the league. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. And then you have like a really opportunistic secondary trying to make plays off of it, which is kind of why it reminds me of like the 2010 defenses where it's like, we're not good down and down. And I don't expect this defense to be good down and down, but you have just enough players on the back end, between Jalon Walker and James Pearce up front. Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell are going to do their thing. Xavier Watts is another ball hog. Billy Bowman's a guy that likes to make plays. I would be really wary of double moves against this Falcons defense because there are a bunch of guys that like to play downhill and make plays in the secondary. But I think that's going to be necessary for where they are, like in the spine of their front seven, which is still very much a work in progress. Like this D-line in the room scares the out of me. like I see Tristan Wirfs and Graham Barden or the Panthers offensive line, I'm like, that's kind of tough. But if they can get into like those favorable situations, they have a chance to make some plays with the speed they have and the playmaking ability they have on the back end.
Yeah, I've compared it a little bit to the vision is like the 2012 defense, which wasn't great at anything. They still had John Abraham, but like it was a lot of just like Asante Samuel jumping throws, getting picks, Thomas Deku not dropping the 3 interceptions that he would always drop every single season and having like a career high interceptions, and like Willie Moe doing his thing of getting these deflections off of tip passes over the middle and whatnot. And sort of like that's kind of the model that I think the Falcons defensively, like it wasn't a good defense. You saw it in the NFC Championship game once the 49ers woke up from their slump after the first quarter and were like, oh, we can just push this defense around all game long. And then they did that for 3 quarters. But like it was a defense that could take advantage of some of the opportunities, particularly with the offense playing at such a high level. And so I think that's the goal. As you say, we'll see if the Falcons live up, because it's not the first time we've been like, oh yeah, the Falcons got this great blueprint for success. But we'll see if they actually live up to that this year.
Look, anyone who's been watching this team knows you can't just bank on a first round pass rusher beating anything. you Jalon and James, I'm sorry, but you guys are gonna have to do it to get the love. We've seen Jamal Anderson, we've seen Vic Beasley, we've seen Tack McKinley. You guys are just gonna have to do it. So we'll see. I really don't, like I said before, and I've said it a million times, I do not hate this haul of players. I just hate what they paid for it. Like even trading up for Xavier Watts, man, you really weren't sure he was going to be on the board with like 5 more picks. And if he was, you couldn't have taken just Billy Bowman there and figure out something in the 4th round. I don't know. It became expensive, which to me suggests Terry is on the hot seat. And every time there's a GM on the hot seat, they start spending, and we'll just have to see what happens. I hope that they have a pass rush this year. I hope that they can score enough points to allow a pass rush to develop this year. But it's a little iffy. We got a lot of young players we're counting on. And now we don't have a young player in 2026 at the top of the first round, maybe.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like having 5 picks again next year is not usually a recipe for success. But obviously, as you say, and many others have said, if they win games this year, like you'll be fine. Like you're not going to lose any sleep over that if they're coming off a playoff season. But
if they're trading the 21st pick of the draft, I can stomach that. If they're trading the 11th pick, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So
make the playoffs.
Yes, please. So, ladies and gentlemen, do not change that. I said don't change it. If you hit skip forward 30 seconds, I will come for you. Okay? Because I know you're eager to see what's more with Charles McDonald here on the podcast. Just wait. Right, we'll get there. Right, we'll get Charles's thoughts on the Falcons' all-in mentality and off-season strategy, whether it's not it's going to play off with a playoff berth coming up on today's Locked On Falcons. So Charles, anything else that stood out to you about this draft, or anything the Falcons have done this offseason, since it's been a good little bit since we talked to you?
I do think it's kind of interesting from like a philosophy standpoint. Like if they're kind of looking at it from the standpoint, it's like it's going to get tough for us to get more stout. Maybe we can just become this defense that just throws haymakers and we're playing full on bend don't break football. I actually do think like that portion of the self-scouting is kind of astute, because this year it might have been easier to find pass rushers and then like healthy defensive tackles in the draft. I just kind of like you remember how it felt when the Dan Quinn era was kind of coming to a close, and you realize every week the Falcons had like the smallest front seven in football, where you have Vic Beasley and Taggart Kinley and Deion Jones, and you are just getting pile drive off the line of scrimmage every year. That's just where I get kind of concerned. And it's just, if this is the draft, if this is the offseason to save your job, I don't know if they did a great job, but given with what they were working with, not a whole lot of cap space, not a lot of picks because of what they did last year, just got to stomach it and just hope that one of these guys can be like, if one of these guys can just accidentally get 10 sacks this year, you probably feel pretty good. You know, we'll analyze all the sacks later, but someone's got to get close to 10 this year. Someone has to. And yeah. I'll take like a 44-13 wild card loss, but please just get there. Because if I hear, you know, with the third overall pick in the 2026 NFL draft, Los Angeles Rams have made a trade to pick Arch Manning, no, I'm going to lose my mind. So please just make the playoffs. That's all I'm asking. Make the playoffs. Michael Penix, let's have some highlights. I can't expect much from this team anymore. But I think like one playoff year, we haven't made the playoffs since like Obama White House is transitioning. You know, come on now. It's been a long time. The worst thing that you can be is like being next to the Jets on those diagrams that says, you know, the worst professional playoff routes. They're there. So make it playoffs this year, please.
Yeah. I agree with you. On that one. So, Charles, I always appreciate you coming on, sharing your insights. Always unique and insightful. Let the people know where those unique insights can come elsewhere and some of the stuff that you're working on this summer.
Oh, man. Hopefully not working on much this summer. But you can find us at Yahoo Sports NFL, Football 301 podcast. We're doing crossovers with the Fancy Forecast podcast. I mean, really anywhere. If you're out in New York, come hang out with me and Bomani and Joel Anderson on Friday at what's it called? It's like Mike's Flying High somewhere in Brooklyn. It's a restaurant. I don't know, but we'll be out there all night.
Go check it out, guys. Appreciate you, Charles, man. Always a pleasure talking.
Flying High Social, that's what it's called. Flying High Social came back to me. Yes.
Okay.
The guy who runs his name is Mike.
All right, guys. Appreciate Charles McDonald for sharing his insights, as unpopular as they may be to some, but very popular to others. So, you know, we try to get both sides of the equation. You know, you decide, you know, do you side with Kevin Knight and say, hey, the trade up was great? Or do you decide with Charles McDonald, hey, the trade up was terrible? Or, you know, are you a normal person and just say, hey, it could go either way. Ask me in 6 months there. That's basically how I feel about it. So we will see what that winds up being for the Atlanta Falcons. Tomorrow's episode, I think we will be doing a 53-man roster projection. And I'll give you my thoughts on the 53 players and potentially 16 practice squatters that will be making this Falcons 69. You're nice. You know, roster and what not upcoming this year. Will they be keeping any of these UDFAs? That's going to be a big question. So that will be something in store for you on tomorrow's episode. So continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen. Check us out by subscribing or following free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. And of course, you can always check out the incredible content here on the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, whether you're checking out Locked On Hawks, Locked On Braves, Locked On Bulldogs, or you want to check out, you know, some of these national shows, Locked On NFL. Of course, Locked On NFL Draft still got you covered. Locked On NFL Scouting with the draft dudes, Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, not only giving you the scoop on, you know, who won the draft, who lost the draft, who got the value picks, who didn't, who reached, all that stuff, as well as all the various fifth-year options and how they impact the roster. It's all about roster building. If you want to have a deeper insight into team building, roster building, how to manage draft picks, salary cap, all that in store, Locked On NFL Scouting with the draft dudes with Joe and Kyle is the place for you. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.